So the US President Donald Trump has announced a peace deal between US and Iran, but it will be signed in the next 5 days in Switzerland. And once that happens, the Strait of Hormuz will be reopened and the naval blockade will be lifted. As expected, oil prices have fallen sharply. European powers have also welcomed the move. A statement from India is awaited. But despite the positive signals coming in from across the world, there are many questions that still remain. What exactly has Iran agreed to? And what happens to its nuclear program? These questions still remain. But let's get you breaking updates now coming in on the reaction and how the world is reacting to this. So oil prices have dropped with Brent crude falling to around $84 per barrel. The decline comes as markets expect lower tensions and smoother oil shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. So global oil prices, remember, fell sharply after reports of the breakthrough came in. The breakthrough peace memorandum between the United States and Iran. So currently, Brent crude has slipped to around $84 per barrel as markets are reacting to the expectations that the tensions in the Middle East may ease. Traders say the deal could help reopen key shipping routes, including the Strait of Hormuz, which is one of the world's most important oil transit points. The fall also reflects the reduced fears of supply disruption as investors respond to the reported diplomatic progress. The announcement came from the US President Donald Trump when he went on to say that the agreement has been reached. There are a few questions that still remain, but US confident that the Strait of Hormuz will be opened up, which is why the Brent crude has slipped and we're seeing a decline in the prices. What does it mean for the world? Does this mean that the oil prices will be reduced across the world? The fuel prices will be reduced across the world? Because as of now, there is hope that this will be long-lasting peace. The US president made this announcement and as usual, he took to his social media platform, Truth Social, to make this announcement. And he said the deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran is now complete. My colleague Akanksha is joining us on the broadcast with the details. And Akanksha, we've seen the prices fluctuating over the last few months, but there has been a very significant increase from February last year to now. Now, finally, we're seeing some reduction in prices on the hopes that this peace deal is going to continue.
Absolutely, because after Donald Trump announced a peace deal between US and Iran and also mentioned that in another 5 days the Strait of Hormuz will be reopened, the investors are quite happy because as far as the key waterway is concerned, it carries 20% of the global oil supply, and that is why now what we are witnessing at this point in time is that the oil prices have gone down. Remember when the war started, that was on Feb 27th earlier this year, the oil prices were at $72.97 per barrel. So that went all the way up to $115 per barrel, and that was around end of the March, and that is when Donald Trump, remember, had mentioned that the whole civilization would be wiped out. He had said that he would be bombing the power plants in Iran, and after that it went all the way up to 115, and now after the announcement that has been made by Donald Trump, it has come down to 84. Now this was a figure that was when the deal was announcement in fact was made by Donald Trump. Now it has gone even further at this point in time. The price stands at $83.1 per barrel is what we're learning so far, and this has to do with the Strait of Hormuz because in the next 5 days it will be reopened.
Okay, all right. Akanksha, thank you for joining us with all those details. In fact, managing editor Zaka Jacob also joins us on the broadcast. We're seeing a slip in the Brent crude prices. There is a lot of jubilation amid a lot of questions that still remain unanswered, especially on the Strait of Hormuz. What is going to be the understanding, and are there going to be any restrictions on the Strait of Hormuz being opened up? Those questions still remain.
Oh, absolutely. But I think the important thing is that after over 100 days now, the war finally seems to be coming to an end. Both the Iranian side and the American side have now confirmed publicly. You've heard from President Donald Trump. You've also heard from Mr. Ghalibaf, who is the Speaker of the Iranian National Assembly, that yes, they have agreed to the 14-point memorandum of understanding between America and Iran. A couple of questions remain, like you said. Yes, what will be this new mechanism in the Strait of Hormuz? Because one of those points says the Strait of Hormuz will be open under Iran's arrangements. Now, Iran has previously said, including when Abbas Araghchi was in India last month, that what they want is some kind of a service charge for every ship that transpasses the Strait of Hormuz. And they are also saying that the service charge will be divided between Iran and Oman, because the northern side of the Strait of Hormuz is controlled by Iran and the southern side is controlled by Oman. Remember, a similar arrangement exists in the Suez Canal as well, where a small service charge is paid by commercial ships to the Egyptian authorities who manage the Suez Canal. So they want a similar kind of arrangement, and the agreement, or at least the justification for it, when Abbas Araghchi was asked about it, was that we need some kind of a revenue source to rebuild our country. It's probably going to take a generation to rebuild Iran from the kind of damage that it has taken in these last 100 days. But I think it's very clear, the big picture is that Iran seems to have won not just this war, but also the terms of this agreement seem to be favoring Iran much more. I think the most important question was the nuclear question, and that effectively has been now deferred by 60 days. Iran has not committed to not enriching anymore. There's nothing in these 14 points about what happens to the nuclear fissile material, the 440 kilograms of enriched uranium that Iran has. There is no commitment by Iran to either give that up to the United States or to IAEA. There's no mention of IAEA inspectors going to Iran and dismantling the existing nuclear infrastructure there. The only line that they have added is that Iran commits itself not to develop a nuclear weapon. But that again, when Araghchi was asked about this last month when he was in India, he said that a fatwa was issued by the previous supreme leader, and they can't go against that, and Iran will never develop a nuclear weapon. But at the same time, like I said, there are no commitments in this 14-point agreement on Iran stopping any enriching. Neither is there any commitment on dismantling the existing nuclear infrastructure in Iran. And also, the Iranian version seems to suggest that on the nuclear question, they will wait for 60 days after the kicking in of this 14-point peace proposal, and they will wait to see how all parties respond. And the nuclear question only needs to be implemented after those 60 days, which means if Israel attacks Lebanon, or if there are other attacks by the US, or if the naval blockade continues or is reimposed, then Iran is under no commitment to keep to or stick to all of these 14 points that have been agreed to, and particularly on the nuclear question. So overall, yes, questions do remain, but I think the important thing is that the war is over after 100+ days. There will be a signing ceremony later this Friday here in Switzerland. It will most likely happen in Geneva. It will have the heads of both America and Iran. Most likely Vice President J.D. Vance might travel here. Trump is expected later tonight here in France, where he is expected to attend the G7 meeting along with all the other leaders of the G7 countries. And this is going to be a huge news for all the leaders who are gathered here in Evian, that after over 100 days, over 3 months, this war is finally coming to an end. There's also going to be a separate meeting between Trump and the leaders of the Arab countries, Egypt, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and others, who will all be here for the G7. And that meeting, he will likely announce what the contours are of this agreement that's been arrived at between Iran and America. Now, one X factor in all of this is, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel. We have seen in the past, including just recently in the last few days, every time there was the possibility or as we were moving closer towards some kind of a ceasefire or a peace agreement, then Israel would go and attack either Lebanon or would attack Iran, and that would again push things back to square one. So it'll be interesting to see how Benjamin Netanyahu responds to this. Clearly, there have been multiple phone calls between Netanyahu and Trump in the last few days, where Trump has clearly told him that he needs to stop and that Israel will only get further isolated as he continues this war. So clearly, they don't seem to be on the same page. For now, Netanyahu has not responded. Let's see if the 60-day window holds, and whether the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz and all the other points that have been agreed to in these 14 points will stick for the period of 60 days. But for now, I think the world will breathe a collective sigh of relief. You're seeing markets rallying, you're seeing the rupee strengthen, so all of that, and you're seeing oil fall. All of these are positive developments, something that the world has been waiting for the last 3 months.
Right. But Zakar, real question in this entire peace deal has been on whether both the sides have the same understanding of the peace or the points that have been mentioned in the agreement, whether both sides have the very same understanding, because we saw what happened the last time. Clearly, US and Iran had a completely different understanding of what that peace deal actually meant. Even now, there is a complete difference. Iran having a very cautious note as opposed to the United States that has been very jubilant in this announcement.
Yeah, because I think Trump realizes that he needed an exit clause. He needed some kind of an off-ramp, and he's got that off-ramp. In fact, left up to Trump, after the ceasefire was announced on the 8th of April, he would have wound down this war very quickly. Remember, the negotiators met in Pakistan, and they were pretty much on the same page on most of the issues. What happened was, a few days after that, Israel went and bombed Lebanon. And that pattern continued every time Trump would post on Truth Social that we are close to a deal, it's a final agreement, it's going to be quickly done. There would be an attack from Israel's side, either on Lebanon or on Iran. And then Iran would retaliate, attacking American military bases in the Middle East. So that pattern, that cycle of violence was continuing for the last month and a half. But finally, I think they've managed to break that jinx. You're right that Iran seems to have a very different understanding. I think Iran seems to have won on some of the major points. Like I said, while yes, they have committed in writing that they will not develop a nuclear weapon, on all other nuclear questions, whether it is enrichment, whether it is handing over the nuclear fissile material that they already have, they are making no such commitments in these 14 points, and therefore that would be a big advantage to Iran. They've also said the implementation of these nuclear conditions will be dependent on actions by all the actors in the region, which means that if Israel were to attack again in the next 60-day window, then Iran is not bound by these commitments. It's not bound by these 14-point peace agreement. So I think Iran clearly seems to have won on the nuclear question, as well as, of course, on the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. It clearly says under an Iranian arrangement. That is Iran's understanding. And that arrangement has been very clearly spelt out by Abbas Araghchi, by Ghalibaf, and others, that they want to charge some kind of a service charge on all the ships, the commercial ships that transpass the Strait of Hormuz, like you have in the Suez Canal, because they say that that's the only way they can generate revenues to rebuild the country. There's also a line in this 14-point where there is some talk about unfreezing Iranian assets. It may not happen directly by the United States, but maybe through some of its Gulf Arab allies like Qatar, or UAE, or Bahrain. Some of those countries might be urged to unfreeze some of the frozen Iranian assets. Again, that will be another source of income for the Iranians to rebuild their country. But you're right, Iran clearly seems to have won not just this war. I think it's very clear that Iran has changed the security dynamic in that region. It has shown that it can open and shut the Strait of Hormuz almost at will. And that X factor, that big battlefield advantage has now translated into the 14-point agreement as well, where Iran has made far fewer commitments than even the JCPOA deal, which was agreed to more than 10 years ago in 2015 when Obama was president, where if you read the text of the JCPOA, Iran had committed to much more, certainly on the nuclear question, much more in the JCPOA than they have in the current 14-point proposal.
So Iran seems to have walked away with a lot more than the United States. Of course, the final text of the Memorandum of Understanding is still awaited. Zakar, thank you for joining us on the broadcast. The announcement has come from the US president and the markets are cheering. Even as we await the details of what this Memorandum of Understanding actually means, Trump has made it clear that the Strait of Hormuz will be open and, in his words, oil will flow on both ends again for the region and the world, which is why we are seeing cheer in the markets. Taiwan stock surging more than 1,000 points Monday morning after the United States and Iran announced a provisional agreement to end their conflict and reopen the Strait of Hormuz, easing global concerns over potential disruptions to energy supplies. South Korean markets have surged on the US-Iran deal to end the war. In fact, we are looking at record highs that are being witnessed, and this can be expected really in markets across the world. And markets are cheering that this could actually mean the end of the war, the tensions that have been ongoing. In fact, Sensex also surging, and we're seeing this happen across the world. Asian markets are rallying on the news of the peace deal announced by the US president. He made an announcement early this morning on his Truth Social, going on to say that this is an immediate end to the war on Iran. Ajay Dua joins us on the broadcast on expected lines. Would you say that Asian markets are cheering, and this can be really expected from markets around the world? Is this going to continue? What do you make of this rally in the markets?
I think something very good has happened, though, as we all know, Israel doesn't seem to be as yet on board because it continued to bomb Beirut even yesterday. But we do hope that wise counsel will prevail upon Prime Minister Netanyahu, and he would also fall in line because the elder brother, the United States, has declared in no vehemently president has declared that the war ceasefire is being effected. They are willing to sign a deal pact with Iran, and so it might be only a question of a day or two before Israel also falls in line. But the main thing seems to have been resolved. That's the cause for the United States to attack Iran and the war having continued for over 105 days. I think the markets would react very positively as soon as they open in a little while in India, and they would follow the line of what's happened in the eastern markets, Japan, Korea, Singapore. In fact, in the case of India, because we are importing oil, a lot of it through the Gulf of Hormuz, and that's also being opened up. That's because U.S. blockade has been lifted as per President Trump. The moment that happens, Iran would do so as well. So I expect that the Indian market would today see a rebound of the kind which it may not have seen for quite a few sessions, and along the lines of what happened on Friday when the Sensex went up by 1,600 points.
Okay, all right. Thank you for joining us on the broadcast.